The anime begins with a strong wind and several mythological animals that appear on the screen, followed by showing us some plains. From these plains, we move to a lake with mountains and continue with a sequence of images from different places around the world. While they show us this, they tell us that the continent, where the most prosperous nation on Earth is located, east and west. Everything is here, and it's where everyone has the opportunity to have it all, equally. Once this is said, we see a wealthy man looking out the window at the entire city, which seems to be very advanced. After seeing this panorama, we transition to that of a common citizen who does not have the same luxuries as the previous person, and this wants to show us the inequality in this city. After this dual focus, the commentator tells us that these two men were raised in the same way, and asks the question, why are their destinies so different? And he tells us that this is due to the special national university exam, and explains that your academic value also determines your value as a person. So passing this exam means you will be successful in the rest of your life, which is why all the children on the continent receive intensive education. These young people's parents pay large fortunes to ensure their future. Those born with great intelligence are known as learning type or type L. Despite what was mentioned earlier, it does not mean that all students behave the same way. Some use artificial skin to cheat, contact lenses that transmit images, etc. All of these devices go against the rules, but parents don't care. By mentioning this, we see different students with these cheating mechanisms and how some risk their physical integrity and are called cheating type or type C students. They use everything they have on the day of the exam. At that moment, we see the students in a classroom taking the famous exam and how several of them copy, but the teachers have mechanisms to detect this. They tell us that since the creation of the imperial exam, the special service has fought against all kinds of tricks and cheats, so cheap techniques don't work. Now they show us two students who stand out from the rest, one of whom is type L, while the other is type C. The latter is shown shooting projectiles at the teachers to incapacitate them with his pen. They tell us that he perfected his technique by training his mind and body, and he relies on type L as it is vital for this type of student. Due to this statement, we wonder, what use does a type C have for a type L student? And we see how type C serves as a bodyguard for type L, preventing other students from approaching him with the intention of copying. Now we see how type C begins to defend type L, even though the latter receives several blows. We see how the classroom slowly turns into a combat zone among students, and regardless of what happens around them, they have to finish the exam. They tell us that strength and wisdom, calm judgment, are what it takes to pass the exam and achieve glory. We see how the man who was looking out the window was the type C who copied and passed the exam. After all this, they introduce us to a girl and a boy who are going to form a pair to take the exam. The boy is named Mumi Shokatsu, and the girl is Koi Oi. These two are taking the exam to save Mumi's father, who was unjustly imprisoned. Then, we see them entering the classroom, and all the students look at them hostilely, and those students will be known as the legendary generation. They show us a shot of the school, and we see Koi Oi copying with some glasses. Then, we see a teacher who is drinking what appears to be alcohol, and at the same time, we see a student using a drone to cheat. Simultaneously, we see two others using different methods. One has a stick with a camera, and the other has a bouncing ball in the classroom, taking photos of other students' exams. Now we see a student hanging from the ceiling, but quickly, rubber arrows hit him, causing him to fall and be disqualified from the exam. Additionally, we see the student who used the ball also disqualified from the exam because arrows falling from the ceiling broke the ball. Finally, we see the camera stick destroyed, and the same fate for the drone that appeared at the beginning. The latter almost crashes into Koi Oi, but Mumi prevents it with an expanding sheet of paper. By doing this, two surprised students mention that what Mumi did is the legendary Shokatsu technique, which was created by the genius strategist Komei Shokatsu. Now we see Mumi dispersing a powder that reveals the sensors in the classroom. While doing this, Mumi says it's a very childish method. By revealing these sensors, he opts to use a technique called Shinrabanshou. They explain that this is a basic skill of the Shokatsu style that creates anything from cut paper. With this, he disables all the sensors, and we see Koi signaling that she has finished the exam, so Mumi decides to start cheating. While doing this, we see a student throwing an insect at Mumi, which cuts his finger, causing a pause in the exam. We see this and other students trying to prevent Mumi from passing at all costs. Despite this, Mumi demonstrates his strength, gradually overcoming the obstacles they put in his way, and this is reflected in a kind of fight but in a different dimension than the classroom. As this fight begins, the teacher who was previously drinking and half asleep wakes up and tells the students that he won't let them do whatever they please. For this, the teacher uses a secret technique called Jagenkibaku. They explain that this technique steals the opponent's freedom with a special gaze, like a snake watching a frog. After doing this, The teacher says that the exam will end shortly, and we see how the student who previously threw insects at Mumi manages to break free from this technique. Additionally, we see the other students starting to use their techniques on the teacher, but none of them affect him. Seeing this, Mumi gets more serious and frees himself from the technique, then releases the sensors and shoots arrows at the teacher. Despite this, the teacher easily mitigates these attacks, saying that the classroom is like my garden, and it doesn't matter what traps you use, I know them all. So, Mumi decides to unleash a flurry of attacks, which ultimately prove ineffective as the teacher dodges them all. We see the teacher suddenly collapsing, and they show that this was due to one of the insects managing to reach him. Despite this, the teacher mentions that there is only 1 minute left, so they don't have time to cheat on the exam. But Mumi decides to use another technique called chutaodansui, which is an ability that cuts the thinnest sheet with extreme precision. In this way, he perfectly copies the exam in less than a minute. Upon finishing the exam, we see Mumi and Koi walking out of the school while talking about how Mumi has already gained admission. Passing the exams with top grades will transform him into a special level graduate, granting him benefits like traveling abroad, thereby enabling him to fulfill his goal of saving his father. We see Mumi surprised to see a radiant girl in a tree, and he becomes enamored with her, calling her Haku-chan. After this scene, we see that the exam will be conducted by a teacher represented as ice, and when the exam begins, the entire classroom turns into Antarctica, surrounded by ice. We see how the students are suffering from the polar cold, and another teacher, referred to as Professor Mammoth, appears. We also see how the student who uses insects tries to use them, but due to the cold, they freeze. At the same time, many students also freeze. Now we see Koi putting on her glasses to start the exam. Simultaneously, Mumi is using a barrier so that the cold does not affect him. After this, we see Mumi and Koi eating after taking the exam. Once again, Mumi is still enamored with Haku but musters the courage to talk to her, albeit a bit timidly. Haku makes an observation about how Mumi and Koi get along well, as if they were a couple, and expresses a desire for a similar relationship, but she doesn't know anyone from the school. Upon hearing this, Mumi tells her that they are just cousins and nothing more, while Koi adds that Mumi is like a tick. Haku comments that they are connected by a relationship they can't let go of, but they can't reveal their family problems to the public. Quickly after saying this, Haku takes Koi's hand and tells her, "Let me hear your story next time." Koi, with a disgusted and uncertain expression, asks if Haku's brain got fried from studying. Upon hearing this, Mumi quickly covers her mouth and tells Haku that he aced the exam. Hearing this, Haku says it's nothing, attributing her success to a lucky pen, her lucky charm. Mumi, with an enamored look, tells her that she's envious and would like to wish her luck, while Koi, with a displeased expression, asks where he got that corny dialogue. Haku once again mentions that they get along well. The student with the insects appears, and as soon as Koi notices his presence, she smacks him in the face and throws him to the ground. Haku asks what happened, and Koi tells her it was the insect's fault. The student gets up, angry and with food all over his face, and we see that he's in love with Koi. Haku asks if he's okay and says she doesn't understand what Koi meant earlier about the insects. So, Mumi tells her that he thinks it was an expression of love. Later, we see Haku in the classroom with Professor Mammoth, who tells her she's caught cheating and is a Class C student. He mentions that the cameras recorded her suspiciously moving her pen, so he's going to inspect it. Professor Mammoth decides to break the pen, which has great value to Haku, but Mumi quickly appears to prevent it. By preventing it, he states that Haku is type L just like him. Once Professor Mammoth hears this, he says that Haku must retake the exam, but this time in the office, and if she doesn't get a perfect score, everyone will be expelled. Nervous and scared, Haku protests that it's unfair since they have nothing to do with it. But Mumi reassures her and tells her to stay calm, saying that he believes in her. This marks the start of the exam, and we see Haku with many doubts. Koi, seeing the exam through the cameras, remarks that the problems are 5 times more advanced. Mumi explains that's the difference between primary school and high school, and he gets angry with the professor and decides to help Haku in his own way by retrieving her pen. A fight ensues between Mumi and Professor Mammoth over the pen. We see Mumi running down the hallway to return the pen to the office. Despite having more difficult problems, Haku manages to get a perfect score and prove her innocence. We see that what Haku had in her pen was a photo of her parents. Seeing this, Mumi says he wants one just like it but in a color that matches Haku's pen, so they can look like a couple. We then see a teacher talking about the relationship between height and fools, mentioning that frivolous people want to draw attention and climb great heights. The students are taking the exam on an airplane. They are given glasses, and all electronic devices in the classroom were destroyed, so those who had them are disqualified from the exam. Mumi's glasses get blown away, and he tries to retrieve them using the technique. Furinkazan controls all kinds of wind to calm it down, and successfully gets the glasses back. The exam concludes, and now Mumi and the student with the insects are eating hamburgers. Koi appears and sits at the table with them. At the same time, Haku arrives, and Mumi warmly welcomes her. Haku thanks Mumi for helping her with the exam in the office and says she wants to thank him in a special way. Upon hearing this, Mumi can only think about the pen and how he would like to be like her. Haku tells him that she'll get him one on Sunday. Haku invites Koi to go buy the pen with Mumi, but he says Koi has to study so he can go alone with Haku. We see Mumi and Haku walking down a corridor and then entering a pen store, which from the outside looks like a cafe. Because of this, Mumi starts to think that he's going on a cafe date with Haku. They enter the place, and the receptionist notices Mumi and immediately asks for his name, appearing to be infatuated with him. The receptionist welcomes them but only allows Mumi into the pen section. Haku comments that previously both of them could enter the store, so it's strange. We see that Koi was secretly following them and notes that what happened is very suspicious. The receptionist introduces himself to Mumi as Rinu Shu, and starts asking him about whether he used a pen in very strange ways, as he is standing too close to Mumi. We see that Koi is eavesdropping on the entire conversation and is misunderstanding everything. Shu continues to ask Mumi about what type of pen he wants, and then he unbuttons his shirt, saying he will choose the pen of his destiny. Mumi is a bit uncomfortable since you grabbed his hand, but we see a red thread coming out of Mumi's hand. Shu follows this red thread to give Mumi the destined pen. Mumi rejects this pen, and Shu is surprised and begins to offer other pens. Mumi starts searching and finds the pen she was looking for. Leaving the place, she sees Haku having coffee and shows him her pen. Haku says that pen is the same as hers. We see Shu leaving the place and silently saying to himself that he and Mumi are destined. We see a shot of the school, then switch to a pool with a teacher in a bikini. She tells them they will take the exam there, and the whole area begins to tremble. We see the pool splitting in half and sucking the students in with a whirlpool. The students find themselves taking the exam in what appears to be the sea but ends up being a huge pool. We see the boy with insects approaching Koi, who is in a bikini, and she quickly rejects him. Now the exam begins, and a student starts saying that it will be easy to cheat since there are no teachers nearby. Quickly, we see some kind of marine creature that appears to be a shark approaching this student and taking him away. We see that this shark has a brain and is the exam proctor. At the same time as this shark, we see it commanding other smaller sharks and they start stripping the students of their clothes. The smaller sharks try to attack Haku and Koi, who lose part of their clothing. So the insect boy and Mumi approach and see them half naked. We see the shark teacher using a technique called Kuga Senpu, creating a huge whirlwind that sends the sharks flying. We see how Haku and Koi start being carried to the center of the whirlpool, but Mumi uses the Shinrabanshou to prevent the sharks from pouncing on them. Using this technique, the shark teacher starts talking to Mumi, and we see how the teacher judges all the students, regardless of whether they cheated or not. We see that the shark teacher's brain is going out of control and begins to say that he wants to end all surface species. Now the teacher starts having a conversation, telling the smaller sharks to destroy all terrestrial life forms. Mumi tries to defend against the attack but doesn't succeed. We see that the insect boy wants to go help Mumi, but he stays looking at Koi, who has less clothing than before and faints. Mumi manages to stay on her feet and continues to defend against the attacks. She uses a new technique called Shippu Dodo, generating waves and strong winds that rotate around her body at high speed. With this technique, she approaches the whirlpool created by the teacher to break his technique. The teacher is surprised by Mumi's strength and says it's impossible for a terrestrial species to have that power. We see how the teacher's brain begins to break, and Koi hands Mumi the completed exam for her to finish. After completing the exam, we see Shu and another student watching Mumi from afar and commenting on how good she is. A shark lunges at one of these two students, but they quickly cut the shark and prevent any harm. There is a shot of what appears to be a church, and it's raining. Inside the place, we see Koi saying, "It's all over." We quickly see Mumi in what appears to be a factory with lava around, about to fight Shu. Their fight begins, and Shu talks to Mumi, but we can't hear anything. Now we see Haku holding a sign with her name, as if she were a criminal. She asks if it's already begun, and we see her being interrogated about two people. Then the insect student also gets questioned about it and ends up saying that in the end, the weak dissip, without finishing the sentence. We switch to Anri, the blonde girl who was talking to Shu earlier. She starts saying that the sword and the scabbard are a good example, just like the fish in the water. Then she says that he himself said, the sword and the scabbard. We go back to Koi, who starts by saying, it's similar to yin and yang, it was decided in the creation of heaven and earth, in worldly terms, it was destiny. We see a junkyard of cars, and Mumi looks frightened. Suddenly, several cars fall from the sky toward him. We see Professor O mentioning that she takes this incident very seriously because she respects the autonomy of the students. Then we see Sakyu and Yukyu saying they can't believe it. We see a broken bench and then we see the insect boy again. When he starts talking, the camera falls to the ground. Haku is seen counting that Koi and Mumi have the best grades because they study every day. Now we see Anri, asking in surprise, is he a type L? We return to Koi, who says things were going too well. We switch to a building with a pool inside, and we see Mumi falling from the sky into the pool. Next, there's another shot with a person holding a sign that says, Hero. He asks for a break because there are offers in the store. Then we see a red-haired girl holding a sign that says, Heroine, and she asks Hero to take her place. Hero tells her that nobody asked him to, so Heroine gets angry and jumps on him. We see both of them blushing, and Heroine slaps him. Now we see Anri asking, did they also find out about that? Yes, it happened 3 times, Haku says. 17 times, Haku adds. We return to Koi, who says she got tired of insolence, arrogance, and presumption and wanted some incentive. Now we see a party where something explodes, and Mumi appears, telling everyone to escape. The insect boy says that the shokatsu techniques are old tricks that aren't that good. He asks for the camera to be moved, but it cuts off just as he's about to say his name. We see Anri asking about the shokatsu technique and that she's seen it many times when entering there. Haku asks what the shokatsu techniques are. Koi says she watched, knowing it was dangerous, and maybe she enjoyed it, so the tragedy was inevitable. We return to the church from the beginning, and we see Mumi carrying flowers while Shun plays the piano. Mumi sits down and applauds Shun, who has finished playing. They confront each other, and Mumi wants to shake hands, but Shun breaks the pen. They point their fingers at each other like guns and start fighting. Professor O says she thought they got along because she always saw them together. We see Mumi and Shun playing basketball as if they were friends. Haku says, if they say so, I guess it's true. We see Mumi walking down the street, and Shun greets him from behind. Anri says he was naive. We see Mumi again drinking a soda, and Shun approaches to taste a bit. The insect boy asks if he's going to come out now. Mumi is in the bathroom, and Shun approaches him and starts watching while he does his business. Haku says she didn't feel anything special for him. Anri comments that he's very famous for those muscles. The insect boy keeps moving the camera and asking if it's visible. Again, the hero and heroine argue. Sakyu and Yukyu scream. We see Mumi and Shun sitting, reading the newspaper. Haku asks, why don't you ask him directly? Anri says, do you really want to know? The insect boy keeps asking if it's visible. Haku says, yes, it was that person, he transferred here recently. Anri says, yes, that's Shu, Rinu Shu. We see Mumi and Shu walking, and Shu removes a petal from a tree branch on Mumi's shoulder. We switch to Shu sitting on a sofa, asking, Mumi Shokatsu? I don't know him. Koi says, may heaven laugh at my stupidity. We return to the fight between Mumi and Shu in what seemed to be a factory. We see Shu lying on the ground, and a black screen appears, saying, Mumi Shokatsu is dead. We see an aerial shot, and Professor O says that teachers are facing more and more problems and she's tired because there's always someone causing trouble. Angrily, she shouts that she wants to take a break and asks if they have their belts on. We see the classroom breaking, and the students find themselves on an aircraft carrier. A brain begins scanning the insect boy, and it tells us his name is Jun and that he has tools for cheating. Because of this, we see that he will be expelled from the exam and is sent flying off the aircraft carrier. Several other students meet the same fate as Jun. Professor O asks if this is okay, and the brain machine says it's perfect, so it can't make mistakes. We move to a shot of the city, which is very dark, and we see a cloaked young man entering a bar. Inside the bar, we see Mumi, and we discover that the cloaked person was Koi. She asks Mumi if he ended up here because of his defeat. Mumi says he's finished, but Koi tells him whether he's finished or not is up to her. Mumi comments that his powers are useless against him, and Koi tells him he has to believe in the Shokatsu technique, just like that person. Mumi knows this but is afraid and says that if he loses again, Koi asks him to believe in her. Mumi changes his mind and shakes hands with her, thanking Koi. However, Koi immediately punches him because he called her by her name when she's supposed to be in hiding. We see the sea in a boat with Koi and Mumi on it. Koei is taking Mumi to the 9th Southern Prison Land, where Mumi's father is located. They are greeted by an old man who guides them along the way. While they walk, the old man asks if Tumen Shokatsu and Mumi Shokatsu are the successors of the Shokatsu technique, and asks if he doesn't know the bloody history of this technique. He begins to tell us that this technique was created in the turbulent era of the Three Kingdoms by a strategist from Shu named Komei Ryu Shokatsu. By adding sorcery to his ingenuity, he managed to create formidable techniques. We see Komei using an attack to destroy a large area. The old man continues to tell us that with such power, the Shu kingdom achieved victory against 3 different kingdoms, but the desolate land was all that remained after its power. He tells us that the Shokatsu technique didn't end there. Komei reflected and researched a technique that would benefit the land, and in the end, it depends on how you use it. He asks both of them if they go to school with that exam and what they are required to do for that special university. Mumi is about to answer, but the old man interrupts him, saying he hopes he won't die after this. Mumi tells him to wait if he can't see him normally. As he says this, the old man disappears. Mumi and Koei find themselves in front of the prison, and a man is seen laughing. This man is with 2 women next to him and begins to speak. He says that when despair crushes him, no matter how many times it happens, his legs won't break, his body is as strong as a wheat stack, and people call it determination and ambition. Mumi asks this mysterious man who he is, to which he replies that he has no name to give him. He then descends from the height and says, "You are Mumi Shokatsu, heir of the Shokatsu style." He reveals that he is in charge of his father's life. By saying this, we see the father in a crucifix-like position. The man tells him that if he wants his father back, he has to defeat him with the best Shokatsu technique. Mumi tells Koei to step aside. She warns him that she won't forgive him if he loses. Mumi shouts that the Shokatsu technique won't lose a second time and proceeds to use the Shinrabanshou technique. This technique is quickly repelled by the mysterious man, who says, "It was just a sigh." Mumi says it's not over and starts using various techniques. He easily repels all of these techniques. While repelling them, he says that Mumi can't make fun of a failed Shokatsu technique because Mumi didn't even see the Shokatsu technique. Kneeling, Mumi says, "What do you know?" The man responds that he is just a third-rate product, and it's obvious that he will lose if he fights with a technique like that. He tells him that his abilities have power and efficiency, but fundamentally, Mumi is the worst. Mumi comments that he studied the texts non-stop, but the man tells him not to get absorbed by secret texts and to determine for himself if he's good or bad. Finally, he asks if that's the limit of his power or if that pathetic Shokatsu technique is all he has. Mumi recalls his confrontation with Shun and says he can still fight, that he still has value. The man laughs and can't believe he's saying that in the state he's in. He tells him to come for him and that he will explain what the true Shokatsu technique is. Mumi asks him, "Who asked you?" The man tells him that one day Mumi will show him his new powers when the moon shines again. When he says this, he kidnaps Koei and tells Mumi that he will not only have his father but also the girl. We see the man telling him that he awaits him at the top of the tower, and he takes Koei with him. Mumi says he will retrieve his father and Koei. We see Mumi in front of the tower asking the man who he is. He responds that he has no name to give him, but he is the heir of the Shokatsu technique style. He also tells Mumi, "Your technique is the Shokatsu style and it's not," and that he will now engrave the true Shokatsu style in his memory. If he wants to know the essence of the style, he must climb to the top of the tower. Mumi decides to go up, thinking it will be a challenge, and enters the tower. Upon entering, he is disappointed because there is an elevator that can take him to the top of the tower. At the end, the masked man greets him, and Mumi, with trembling legs, comments that only those who have overcome a difficult path can be there. As he says this, his mask falls off, but it appears he has another mask underneath. Mumi tells him he took the elevator, so it's not a big deal. The man tells him that he already knows he controls the wind in the Shokatsu technique, but only those who manipulate both wind and fire can be called members of his school. He asks Mumi if he can control fire. We see Mumi trembling, and the man asks if he's afraid. But at the same time, Mumi says that his legs are also trembling. The man says that fire is the most familiar phenomenon to humanity, and the one who controls it is the winner. He comments that many adventurers have come there, but very few have returned safely. A screen is displayed from the ceiling, and we see Koei eating ice cream next to a doll with Mumi's father's name on it. The man starts the challenge and tells him to try to obtain the fire if he can. Mumi says he will. The man comments that controlling fire is to confront it, which people call empathy. We see Mumi entering a room with a lot of heat, and it turns out to be a sauna with a group of people inside. One of these people tells Mumi to take off his clothes to enter the sauna, as it is considered impolite, and they invite him to sit inside. Mumi sits down and says he can't stand the hot air, so he wants to go get some water. One of the people quickly stops him and tells him he can't leave. As he says this, the person's mask falls off, and he tells Mumi he can do it and must control the heat. Surprised, Mumi says he just wants to get some water, that he doesn't want to escape. The people inside the sauna start cheering Mumi on to prevent him from escaping and hug him. After a while, embraced by the people, the masked man tells him that he finally controls the heat, and everyone starts applauding him. The second test begins. We see a group of men working, and the masked man appears again. He gives Mumi 2 dolls and says, combustible, incombustible, incombustible, etc. So Mumi says they are combustible and incombustible and separates them by material. The man tells him that to control fire, he needs eyes to see what to ignite. Mumi starts separating them by combustible and incombustible. When he finishes dividing, he moves on to the third test. Now we see the masked man dressed as a tree. Mumi thinks that he has finally finished his training, but the man tells him it's arrogant to think he can do something with his power, and there he will learn that. Mumi is about to launch an attack but falls to the ground as he can't move as he wants. The man tells him that they are at an altitude of 600 meters above sea level, so the oxygen is 93%, therefore, his strength is less than 7%. Mumi's head starts hurting, and he begins to see blurry. The man tells him that those who underestimate high altitudes receive a fatal blow and tells him to try to control the oxygen. Mumi stands up and sees that the man has an oxygen can in his hand. The man begins to say, fire, fire, wind, repeatedly, and Mumi doesn't understand. Mumi decides to attack him while asking what he means by what he's repeating. When he attacks, he gives him a kick of fire and manages to break the tree mask. The man tells him that he manipulated the oxygen and was able to control the fire. We see Koi watching everything and rejoicing because Mumi was finally able to obtain the fire. After passing this test, they decide to go to the final challenge. In this challenge, Mumi must fight the man, and if he defeats him, he will release Koi. Mumi tries to perform a fire attack, but he fails. The man quickly attacks with a wind technique called Shippujinrai and extinguishes Mumi's fire. When he does this, he comments that using fire alone is not enough since it's just willpower, it's the wind that turns it into power. This clicks in Mumi's head, and he uses a technique called Fun Tosho Konen Hanabe. By using this technique, he finally cuts the mask off the man, revealing that he is Mumi's father. Mumi asks where Koi is. As he approaches Koi, he sees her eating calmly and saying she can't eat anymore. Mumi's father approaches him to give him the feather of the Shokatsu technique, which symbolizes the power of his fire. Now we are in the classroom, and Professor O is complaining that she made a stew but the flavors always mixed, so she asks if there's a way to prevent it. Upon hearing this, Mumi enters the classroom and says that's wrong because the idea of stew is that those two flavors mix, and people call it true emotion. Haku is surprised to see him. It starts with a toucan screaming, and we see that we are in a jungle. We see Jun asking where the exam area is. Now we have Professor O telling the students that they are on the edge of a waterfall, and those who pass the exam will be able to use the engines to get out. However, the others who can't pass will fall down the waterfall. Mumi tells Shu to apologize for making him wait and that he's going to repay the favor now. Shu pretends not to know him because he doesn't have time to remember losers. Mumi, perched on some leaves, says he's going to make sure he doesn't forget again. These two are about to fight while some students start falling from the waterfall. Quickly, Shun manipulates some red threads that break Mumi's leaves. Mumi decides to attack him with paper airplanes, but Shun repels all of them except one that cuts his face. Receiving this cut, Shun gets a bit agitated and decides to get more serious. Mumi suddenly attacks Shun, and an explosion occurs in the sky. Meanwhile, Haku and Koi are taking the exam. Jun is still lost in the jungle, and one of his insects, Mary, leaves his side. We return to the fight between Mumi and Shun, which becomes very intense, and they continue causing explosions in the air. A man appears on a boat, commenting that if they destroy the boat, they will be disqualified. Upon hearing this, Shun and Mumi tell him to shut up as he's in the way and attack him to throw him off the waterfall. Mumi uses the feather given to him by his father to launch a technique called Kakagekihatsu, creating fire with the friction of the feather and paper. Shun easily manages to deflect the attack. Mumi discovers that Shun uses threads, which are very fine, to attack. Shun tells him it's useless to discover that because whether he uses fire or wind, he won't damage his crimson threads. Mumi uses Hoka Retin, manipulating multiple flames at once. This technique can only be used by those who have studied the highest levels of the Shokatsu technique. Shun tells him it's useless, and there is an explosion in the air. Koi completes the exam with a perfect score. She is surprised to see the fight between Mumi and Shun and decides to go watch it, with Haku following her. We see Jun lying on the ground, wondering if he'll die this way. A group of people who appear to be from a tribe surrounds Jun. The professor who fell from the waterfall says that if they attack a teacher like this, they must be type C, so they will be punished. The professor is about to launch a missile at them, but Anri appears to stop it. She tells him that he can't do that as it will interrupt a good fight, and we see Anri's eyes light up, causing the professor to drastically change his mind. Anri wonders which of the two techniques, between Mumi and Shun, is better to become a special level graduate. We see Koi drooling with excitement over the fight. Shun, while repelling Mumi's attack, tells him that he's not even good for killing time. He mentions that his thread is flexible, sometimes hard as steel, and sometimes like silk. Mumi already knows this and decides to keep attacking. One of the attacks passes through the threads and almost hits Shun, who manages to dodge it in time. Mumi tells him that he won't fail next time. We see Haku yelling at Koi to be careful as she's about to collide with a rock. Mumi sees this and rushes to save her. He uses the Shokatsu technique's greatest secret called Kabufun. Fire and wind become one, breaking the stone in the process. We see that Koi is about to fall into the waterfall, but Mumi arrives in time to prevent it. They crash into something. That something was Shun's threads, which prevented Mumi and Koi from falling. Shun tells him that he only saved him because he didn't want him to die after fleeing the fight and extends his hand. Mumi tells him that next time he'll kick his butt, and Shun accepts the challenge. Upon hearing this, Koi blushes at the scene between Mumi and Shun. We see that Jun ended up in a tribe, and its members kneel before him. We see Professor O saying that she was a very simple student until high school, but she made an effort to change when she got to prep school. We see that they are now in a fashion contest. The first participant in this contest is Mumi. The hostess says that Mumi has a positive attitude but doesn't look as cool as he thinks he does, so he is disqualified. The second participant is Haku, and they say she is adorable but has a somewhat scatterbrained personality, which can be fixed later, so she advances to the next round. The third participant is Jun, who automatically loses because he is dressed with his insects. The fourth participant is Koi, who charms one of the judges, but the hostess is shocked by the outfit she wore to compete. Despite this, several judges vote in her favor. The hostess asks her to smile, and Mumi tells her it's part of the exam. Koi smiles in a very creepy way, which scares the hostess and causes her to be eliminated. We see Professor O entering a house with Haku, Anri, and Koi. Behind them, one of Jun's insects follows them. The professor leaves them in a room and tells them not to look in strange places. Upon hearing this, Anri starts searching because she feels that the professor is hiding something she doesn't want them to see. Haku tells her to wait, but Anri doesn't seem to care. Anri finds the professor's sexy lingerie, which embarrasses Haku, but Koi says that the lingerie has no functionality. Anri tells her that's why she's going to fail the fashion exam. Koi says she won't accept this as an exam since clothing can only be judged by personal opinion. Professor O calls the girls to have something to drink. At the table, Anri suggests surrounding Koi and having a girls' meeting. Koi mentions it was because of Professor U's private lessons. Anri asks the teacher if she doesn't think Koi is too rigid. The teacher replies that it must be a youthful thing. Haku finds Koi's personality wonderful. Anri suggests that since they are together, they could get excited about a topic, as they are always studying or taking exams, and they should do something feminine sometimes. In Professor U's head, she starts saying, "Feminine? Yes, I'm a girl too." And that she should tell that Baldy when he says weird things like, "She's 30, act like it." Without realizing it, she shouts, "Idiot." Upon hearing this, Anri asks if she's drunk. The teacher replies that she's not. Haku says the food is delicious, and Anri tells her she's very carefree. Haku smiles and says she's told that often, but Anri comments that it's not a compliment. Anri asks Koi what clothing brand she likes. Koi makes a strange face, and Anri tells her not to make that face. She asks which website she uses, and she likes Weeg and Mystery. Koi says she doesn't know because her mother buys her clothes. Anri then asks if she reads fashion magazines or watches things on TV. Koi says she doesn't do those things at home. Anri looks surprised and asks the same to Haku. Haku replies that her mother also buys her clothes at home. Anri says that's too much for a high school student and seeks the teacher's approval, asking if she chooses her clothing nicely. The teacher stops drinking and says, "Nice? Yes. I was told to be a beautiful woman, but it's not rude. I've always been beautiful. You have to try harder not to be a frog." She says many more senseless things. Haku continues to eat and says, "Delicious," for some reason making the teacher throw herself on her. Anri and Koi watch the situation in amazement. The teacher on top of Haku asks, "Is that why you're supposed to be beautiful?" She tells her it must be nice to be young, that even without makeup, people tell her she looks good, right? She says that they used to tell her that 10 years ago. Starts crying. The teacher begins to tell that her parents used to tell her that all that mattered was that she was happy and healthy. But she didn't believe them and thinks they've already thought of names for their grandchildren and studied the stroke count. Seeing her like this, Anri asks if being an adult is hard. Meanwhile, Haku and Koi continue eating as if nothing is happening. We see the teacher surrounded by alcohol cans and clutching a bottle, sleeping on the floor. Anri covers her with a blanket. Haku says Koi has always been that cute, and that's fine. Haku proceeds to feed Koi by hand, which she accepts without any problem. Once Koi takes the food from Haku, she blushes with excitement. Seeing this, Anri tells her that she spoils her too much. Haku continues to feed Koi, and Anri tells her that if she keeps eating so many sweets, she'll gain weight. But Koi mentions that due to her metabolism, she won't have any problems. Haku says the same happens to her and proceeds to give her more food. Anri holds her head and says she's starting to understand how Professor O feels. After finishing this sentence, she hits the table with her hand and says it's time to get to the real topic. Despite what Anri just said, Haku keeps giving food to Koi. Once again insists on getting to the real topic, but this time she shouts. Koi tells her not to shout because she'll disturb the neighbors. Anri continues to shout and tells them they are too carefree. Haku confirms this, saying that they are often told the same thing. Anri takes a sip from a glass and asks both of them if there's someone they like. Haku, blushing and surprised, asks why she's asking that question. Anri notices her reaction and asks her who it is. She asks if it's Shu because he's cool, but Haku tells her that she wouldn't be interested because he's cool. Anri match. Haku denies it, saying it was just a coincidence. Anri doesn't believe it was a coincidence, but the teacher decides to interrupt the conversation, saying that the other day she was invited for drinks by a younger guy, and just when he started thinking she might be what would happen if she got interested in someone younger the more she drank. She shouts that she refuses to become some weirdo who can't be invited because she looks like a light novel heroine. She ends the sentence with "baldy" and goes back to sleep. Anri says they should stop inviting her. Haku approaches Anri to tell her who she's most interested in and says it's Koi. Anri is surprised, and Koi shows no signs of understanding what's happening as she is fully concentrated on eating. Once again, we see the teacher sleeping, and the clock shows that it's nighttime. Seeing this, Anri says it's late and they should leave. Meanwhile, Haku since the teacher ended up on the floor sleeping, and Koi's transformation didn't progress at all. Haku says it was still fun and asks Koi if she again. Professor O suddenly wakes up and says she's glad they get along and wishes them eternal happiness. She goes back to sleep, but this time we see her in bed. She quickly wakes up and says she'll give them the baby's first gift. Haku gets scared and says she doesn't have a baby. Haku and Koi continue eating as if nothing happened. Out of nowhere, we see the hero and the heroine with another green-haired girl entering the teacher's house. We then see Professor O in the classroom full of energy, talking about how she recently lost 2 kilos and that she's going to treat herself to some macaroni. When the students hear this, they say she talks too much. The teacher, upon hearing this, says it's time to start the exam. We see Koi and Haku quickly writing on the exam. Professor O begins to leave the classroom, and as she does, she tells the students that this is the final semester exam and those who perform poorly on this exam will be expelled. Mumi wonders what's going on because it's the final exam, but there are no teachers present. Jun asks what they are planning. Anri wonders if they might be hiding. Koi comments that they want them to let their guard down. A background noise is heard, and we see a student fall from his chair. So, Mumi, Jun, Anri, and Koi say they have to stay alert and can't let their guard down. The 4 of them begin to think that there are no teachers, but Koi still says they have to solve the problems regardless of the teacher's presence. We see how the windows are covered with metal curtains. A disco ball descends from the ceiling, and a dark figure with glasses appears. Apparently, it's a teacher who starts by saying that with his voice, he has guided countless children onto the right path. Jun says he's just an old man, so he decides to have Mary attack him. Remember that Mary is the insect, but when he does, the teacher talks to her, and she falls in love with him. Because of this, Mary decides to attack Jun. Several students see that the teacher is alone and try to attack him, but they all fall in love with him. Shun and Mumi start talking and comment that the teacher is a true monster. They say he is the best and strongest voice actor in the country, doing everything from children's shows to variety programs. Anri says his work has expanded to the internet, so everyone in the country is fascinated by him. Mumi says he is the strongest artist in the country. The teacher confirms this and says his name is Katsuhira. Katsuhira starts saying that they should remember their dreams from their youth and proceeds to say, "I have intelligence and pride." With this phrase, he enamors many of the students who begin to remember their childhood. Anri comments that with his voice, everyone gets lost in their dreams of youth, preventing them from continuing with their exam. Katsuhira tries to defeat Anri, who tries to use her eyes to control him, but he rejects it. Katsuhira manages to transform Anri into a voice actress named Soufflé Macaron. They tell us that Anri's dream is to release a photo book, be in a band, go to a singing contest, and release many products. Katsuhira tells us that he has appeared in countless productions, teaching children about dreams in the future. Furthermore, he says he is guided by the will of heaven, and in this way, he achieved enlightenment. He tells us that the way to guide a child onto the right path was to be a teacher. He comments that he will rehabilitate students who use violent techniques to cheat. Upon hearing this, Mumi says he will kick the butt of anyone who cheats. Katsuhira says he won't forgive an excellent and capable student like him for being a type C. Mumi tries to pretend he's not cheating. Katsuhira tells us he became a teacher to rehabilitate type C individuals. A fight between Mumi and the teacher begins, and the teacher starts using his phrase to transform Mumi. Mumi begins to say that he wanted to be a chef, but Shun's threads break his power. Shun and Katsuhira start fighting. Katsuhira's voice manages to impact Shun, and now it's Mumi's turn to fight. However, Katsuhira's attacks don't manage to hit Mumi because she uses the Seihitsu Yuju technique, creates a perfect vacuum by controlling atmospheric movements. Mumi uses Enko for You, creates a wind dragon while creating a tiger with flames. This attack hits Katsuhira and destroys a large part of the classroom. Katsuhira gets up from the attack and decides to attack Kuoi. None of his attacks affect Kuoi because she doesn't know who Katsuhira is since she never had television or internet in her life. Koi tells us that her father had a huge debt, which prevented them from having a television. After defeating Katsuhira, Professor O appears, breaks Mumi's exam, and comments that the real exam is just beginning. We're in the classroom, and Professor O tells Mumi that what he did was splendid. Professor O mentions that they passed the final exam but that now the real test will begin. As she says, the floor the moon. This causes the moon to start approaching the Earth. The professor comments that if the moon continues to approach, the school and the entire world will be destroyed in a few hours. The school's representative, so if he wants to prevent the moon from falling, he must pass this exam. Anri asks the professor who she is. The professor says she is a messenger from the universe with superior technology and culture. She was appointed as the school's teacher to see if they had grown to a point similar to her species. If they pass this exam, they will be regarded as equals, but if they fail, they will have no value. Mumi asks the professor if she is very tired. The professor responds by saying that maybe they need a more comprehensible motivation, so she kidnaps Haku. Doing this, a desk emerges from the ground, and the professor tells Mumi that if he wants to prevent the moon from falling and save Haku, he must pass. Mumi says it's not a problem because nothing is impossible for the Shokatsu technique, so the professor starts the exam. Mumi tries to use a technique, but a purple dome begins to surround him. The professor explains that it's an anti-Shokatsu technique machine that she invented, also known as MOS. This field will stop all of his techniques. Mumi doesn't believe this and tries to use a technique, but it's futile. The professor tells him that she has been analyzing Shokatsu techniques all this time and tells him that if he doesn't hurry to answer, the moon will collide with the Earth. Mumi starts thinking, but he can't come up with anything. Koi says he's useless without her help. Anri asks the professor if she can stop that machine and uses her eyes, but it's useless. Jun and Shun try to attack the professor, but she repels them very easily. Mumi continues to ponder how to solve the exam but comes to the conclusion that he knows nothing. Suddenly and unexpectedly, we see the teachers appearing on an aircraft carrier. The teachers, the hero, and the heroine attack Professor O, but it's futile as she defeats them all with a single blow. High above, a masked man is watching everything that happens while repeating 10, 10, 10. We return to Mumi, who wonders why she's so imposing. At the same time, a tsunami and a tornado are occurring around the school. Koi asks if she's going to give up again and reminds her that he said there was nothing the Shokatsu technique couldn't handle. He tells her that she's not alone. Mumi sees the other students near him. Shun tells him that they haven't settled anything among themselves. Jun adds that they're going to beat her. Once again, Anri asks the professor to stop the machine and uses her eyes again. The professor repels this attack and says she hates students who don't listen. She comments that everything they do is useless since they can't use their techniques. Shun says he's not sure about that, and we see Mary disconnecting the purple dome that surrounded Mumi. Anri says she let her guard down and is glad they could distract her for a moment. Koi identified the key points of the machine for Mary to destroy. Shun surrounds Professor O with his threads and tells her not to move. Koi says they can't use their abilities individually, but they can seize no matter how deep the darkness. In this world, there is no unbirthed right. As long as there are unbroken hearts, a light will shine in the dark sky. People call it the dawn's light. We see Mumi using the technique, with the students helping him. Mumi changes his appearance. His hair turns into flames, and his technique is called Nichiren Shouten, transforms into the sun by covering himself in flames. It's the most powerful technique of the Shokatsu. The professor tries to attack him but to no avail, and she comments that it's Mumi's true power. With this power, Mumi manages to destroy the machine and free Haku. We see that Koi managed to solve the exam. Haku begins to fall, but Mumi saves her in midair. We see Mumi naked, but Mary covers his private parts. The next day, we see Professor O again. Mumi says that yesterday was terrible, but Haku found it fun. Koi gives Mumi a letter from Shu. We see that Shu called him to a meeting place. Koi follows him to the meeting place. We see Mumi approaching Shu. As he approaches, a gunshot is heard, and Koi shouts, "No." And that's how the first season of this anime ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to make it this far. So comment the word cheater in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.